The week my son brought his new wife home for Thanksgiving, I made her favorite dish without even knowing what it was. I just guessed. Roasted butternut squash with brown sugar and pecans, something I'd seen in a magazine. She took one look at it, said she didn't eat refined sugar, and pushed the dish to the edge of the table like it was something I'd dragged in from outside. I smiled and said, "More for us then." That was 3 years ago. I should have known then. My name is Helen Carr, and I'm 66 years old. I live in Savannah, Georgia, in the same house where I raised my son, where I buried my mother's ashes in the garden out back, where my husband Walter and I spent 38 years building something quiet and good together. Walter passed 19 months ago, pancreatic cancer, 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end, which is both merciful and cruel depending on which day you ask me. I want to tell you something before I go any further. If you're listening from somewhere, drop your city in the comments. I want to know how far this has traveled. And please stay with me until the end, because what happened to me didn't end the way anyone expected. Least of all my daughter-in-law. Walter was a civil engineer. That's what he told people at parties, at church, at the school functions we sat through together for years. Civil engineer. It's a perfectly respectable thing to say, and it was true, technically. What he left out, what we both left out, was the rest of it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. My son James is 39 years old. He's a good man, soft in ways that used to worry me when he was young, but that I came to understand were not weakness. They were just kindness shaped differently than what his father showed. He works in healthcare administration in Atlanta, 2.5 hours from Savannah. He married Crystal 14 months before Walter died. I'll tell you what Crystal is like by telling you what happened the first time she came to this house. She walked through every room, not like a guest, not like someone exploring with curiosity or warmth, but like someone taking inventory. She paused at the hallway where Walter's architectural drawings were framed, the ones from his early career, and she said, "These are interesting. Old." Then she moved on. She asked how many square feet the house was. She asked when we'd last updated the kitchen. She asked what the neighborhood was trending toward. I thought she was just nervous, making conversation. Real estate small talk. But she wasn't nervous. That was just how she saw the world, as a collection of assets to be assessed and optimized. Crystal is 34. She works in corporate accounting. She drives a white Audi, wears clothes that are expensive in a way that's designed to look effortless, and has the particular confidence of someone who has never seriously been wrong about anything and doesn't believe that day is coming. She made my son happy, or seemed to. He lit up around her in that helpless way people do when they've tied their sense of self to another person. He laughed at things she said that weren't funny. He checked his phone when she texted during our Sunday calls. He stopped coming home for Christmas the second year of their marriage because, he explained carefully, Crystal's firm did their annual retreat that week, and it was important to her career. I said I understood. I did understand. I just also understood what it meant. Walter died on a Tuesday in March. James and Crystal drove down from Atlanta. They stayed 5 days, which was kind. On the 4th day, Crystal asked me if I had a will. I told her yes. She said, "Good, because a house like this, in this market, you really want to have everything in order." Walter had been gone 4 days. I nodded and changed the subject. 19 months later, that conversation came back to me. It was a Sunday in October. James called 3 days before, the way he does when he's been rehearsed. His voice had that particular careful quality, each sentence landing with just a little too much precision, like someone reading from notes they're trying not to sound like they're reading from. "Mom, we'd like to come down this weekend. Crystal and I want to talk about some things. About the house. About your future." Your future. The phrase sat in my chest like a stone. They arrived Saturday at noon. James brought flowers, which he never does unless he feels guilty. Crystal wore a blazer and carried a leather folder. A folder. To my house. On a Saturday. I made lunch. I always make lunch. Chicken salad on croissants. Sweet tea. A peach cobbler I'd had cooling on the counter since morning. Crystal ate 3 bites of the chicken salad and left the rest. She didn't touch the cobbler. We sat in the living room afterward, the same living room where James had his first birthday party, where Walter and I used to watch the news together with the sound too loud, where the couch still has a worn spot on the left armrest from 40 years of Walter sitting in exactly the same place. Crystal set the folder on the coffee table. "Helen," she said, and I noticed she'd stopped calling me Mom about 8 months into the marriage. "We want to talk to you honestly, because we love you and we're concerned." I looked at James. He looked at the window. She said, "You're living in a 4-bedroom house by yourself. That's a lot of house for one person. You're 66. The yard alone is almost half an acre. The roof is original. The HVAC system is probably 15 years old. And Savannah real estate right now. Mom, this house is worth real money. You could be sitting on something and not even realizing how much." I said, "How much do you think it's worth?" She pulled out her phone without hesitating. "Based on recent comps in this neighborhood, somewhere between $680,000 and $740,000. Probably closer to $720,000 given the lot size." She'd already looked it up. James leaned forward then, elbows on his knees, doing the concerned son posture. "Mom, we're not trying to pressure you. We worry. You're alone out here. If something happened, it could be hours before anyone knew. And this house, the maintenance of it. Dad always handled that stuff. Are you really managing all of it okay? Your father handled it, as if I had spent 38 years standing in the background handing Walter tools and waiting to be managed." I said, "I'm managing fine." Crystal opened the folder. "We've actually done some research. There's a community called Whitfield Crossing, out toward Pooler. It's independent living, not a nursing home, nothing like that. They have a fitness center, a pool, organized day trips, all meals included. It's actually very nice." She slid a brochure across the coffee table, a photograph of white-haired people playing pickleball under a blue sky. "The entry fee for a 1-bedroom is $95,000, she continued, "and then a monthly fee of $3,200, which sounds like a lot. But if you sell this house, you'd have more than enough. The remainder could go into a managed account. James and I would help oversee it. Just to make sure you're protected. You wouldn't have to worry about any of it. A managed account, with James and Crystal overseeing it. I would sign over my home, move into a 1-bedroom apartment in Pooler, and hand my finances to my son and his wife, who had come to this conversation with a printed brochure and a leather folder." "I'd like some time to think," I said. Crystal's expression didn't change, but something behind it did, like a door closing. "We've actually already put our name on a wait list at Whitfield Crossing," she said. "There's a unit coming available in February. If we don't move forward, we lose the spot." She put a name on a wait list before asking me. James said softly, "Mom, we're not trying to rush you, but we also can't just watch you struggle in this big house and not say anything." I wasn't struggling. I had not once said I was struggling. I was gardening and walking 4 miles every morning and volunteering at the Historical Society on Thursdays and having dinner with my friend Ruth every other Friday and reading 2 books a month and sleeping 8 hours a night. I was not struggling. I was grieving, which is different. "Give me 2 weeks," I said. Crystal looked at James. That look, quick, barely a flicker, said everything. It said they had already decided. It said this conversation was not a discussion. It said this conversation was not a discussion. It said my 2 weeks were being tolerated, not respected. James nodded. 2 weeks, Mom. Of course. After they left, I sat in Walter's armchair for a long time. I am not someone who cries easily. Walter used to say I processed grief by making lists, which was true and is not a character flaw, so I made a list. What Crystal knows, the house is worth roughly $720,000. I am 66 and living alone. Walter handled the finances. What Crystal does not know, almost everything else. Here's what I have never talked about, not at church, not at the neighborhood association meetings, not even with Ruth, though Ruth suspects more than she lets on. Walter was a civil engineer. He was also, for the last 26 years of his career, a partner at Carr and Whitmore Engineering Group, a firm he co-founded in 1998 with his college friend, Dennis Whitmore. They specialized in large-scale infrastructure, bridge retrofits, municipal water systems, highway drainage projects across the Southeast. By the time Walter was diagnosed, the firm had 82 employees and contracts with 6 state dots. And I was not standing in the background handing him tools. I was the firm's operations director and co-owner. 49% to Walter's 51, a distinction we made for legal simplicity and never revisited. I handled contracts, billing, HR, compliance, vendor relationships, and the financial reporting that kept us certified for government work. I worked from home for the first 12 years when James was young, which is why everyone assumed I didn't work. Then I worked from our downtown office, which I drove to every day in the same sensible Buick I'd had since 2009, wearing the same practical clothes I've always worn, because I am a person who does not need to announce herself. We did not raise James with this knowledge because we watched what happened to the children of people we knew who were raised with it. Boys who never held a job. Women who married badly because they knew there was always a cushion. We wanted James to work because he chose to, not because he had to, but was also aware he didn't have to. The distinction matters. When Walter died, Dennis and I negotiated a buyout of my stake in the firm. Dennis had 2 junior partners ready to step in. We settled on $3.8 million, paid in 2 installments, the first in September of last year, the second due in April of this year, 6 months away. The house, which Crystal assessed at $720,000, was independently appraised at $890,000 last spring. I own it free and clear. Walter also carried a $1.5 million life insurance policy that paid out in May of the year he died. The Vanguard accounts, the ones I've managed quietly for 20 years, rebalancing every quarter, nothing flashy, nothing speculative, sit at just over $4.1 million as of last month. My total net worth, if you're keeping track, is somewhere in the neighborhood of $11.3 million. Crystal wanted to put me in a 1-bedroom apartment in Pooler and manage my finances on my behalf. I sat in Walter's chair and thought about what Richard used to say. No, that's not right. That was someone else's story. What Walter used to say was this: the best position to be in is the one the other side doesn't know you're in. I picked up the phone and called Ruth. "It's 9 o'clock, she said. "I know. Can you come over?" She arrived 20 minutes later with a bottle of Pinot Grigio she'd been saving and the expression she gets when she already knows something is wrong. Ruth is 71, a retired family court judge, and she has seen more than almost anyone I know. She also has the specific quality of listening without offering a solution until you've finished, which is rarer than people realize. I told her everything: the folder, the brochure, the wait list she'd already put our name on. Ruth poured us each a glass and was quiet for a moment. "Can they actually do anything legally?" I asked. "Force anything in Georgia?" She thought about it. Guardianship proceedings are possible if someone can demonstrate you're unable to manage your own affairs. It's a high bar, but if they get a sympathetic judge and you walk in without good representation, things can go sideways faster than they should. She looked at me. "But Helen, you managed the finances of a company with state contracts for 2 decades. They don't know that. Then we should probably make sure the right people do." She picked up her wine. "You have someone? An attorney?" I did have someone. Walter and I had used the same estate attorney for 15 years, a woman named Carol Jeffries at a firm on Bay Street. Sharp, detail-oriented, the kind of lawyer who schedules follow-up calls without being asked. I hadn't spoken to her since we updated the will after Walter's diagnosis, but I knew she'd remember me. Monday morning, I called Carol. She cleared an hour that afternoon. I told her what had happened. She listened without interrupting, which I appreciated. When I finished, she said, "Tell me about your current asset structure." I told her. There was a pause. "Okay," she said, and I could hear her recalibrating. "We need to do a few things fairly quickly. First, I want to get an irrevocable trust established before any legal proceedings could be filed. It creates a layer of protection on the major assets. Second, I'd like to refer you to Dr. Anita Bramwell at Memorial Health. She does capacity evaluations. Thorough, court admissible, no one questions her work. Third, are you recording your conversations with them? Not yet. Georgia is a one-party consent state. You can record any conversation you're a participant in. Starting now, I'd suggest you do. She said it the way she might say, don't forget to bring your ID. Practical. Efficient. What if they take me to court? I asked. Then we win, Carol said simply. But I don't think it gets there. People who are planning to take advantage of someone usually aren't prepared for the person to fight back. That week moved quickly. Carol filed the trust paperwork. Dennis confirmed in writing that the second installment from the firm buyout, $1.9 million, the final payment, would arrive in April as scheduled. I met with Dr. Bramwell on Thursday. She spent 3 hours with me. Cognitive assessments, financial literacy questions, judgment scenarios. At the end, she told me I scored in the 94th percentile for my age group and that my financial reasoning was, in her words, well above average for any age group. She'd have the written report ready the following week, notarized, sealed, ready for any court. Friday evening, Crystal called. I pressed record. Helen, I just want to check in, see how you're thinking about things. I appreciate you calling. We're just worried about you sitting on this decision. The Whitfield Crossing Unit. February is coming up faster than it feels. I understand, and honestly, we've been thinking, while we're sorting everything out, it might make sense to go ahead and get you set up with a financial power of attorney, just so James can help manage things day to day. It's really just about making things simpler. I said, can you tell me why you think I need help managing things day to day? A pause. Well, you're alone, and Walter handled so much. Do you know what's in my Vanguard account right now? Silence. Do you know when my property taxes are due, or what I paid in Q3 estimated income taxes, or what the current expense ratio is on my index fund holdings? More silence. I do, I said. I've managed this family's money for a long time. I don't need a power of attorney, Crystal. What I need is for you and James to trust that I am a grown woman who has been navigating complex decisions since before either of you were born. Her voice went cool. We're trying to help. I know what you're trying to do, I said, and I let that sit there. She said, this is going to be a lot harder than you think, Helen. James is on my side on this. We have documentation. We have a plan. You're going to end up looking like you refused help until it was too late. I'll take my chances, I said. Thank you for calling. I saved the recording with shaking hands. Not because I was afraid, because I was angry, and anger, when you're my age, lives in your hands before it finds your voice. James called the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. He said he was worried about me, that Crystal was just trying to help, that he hoped I would be reasonable. He used that word, reasonable, the way people use it when they mean compliant. I called him back that afternoon and asked him one question. James, when did I ever give you reason to doubt my judgment? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, Mom, this isn't about your judgment. When did I ever give you reason to doubt my judgment? A longer silence. You didn't, he said finally, quietly. Then give me the 2 weeks I asked for, please. He said he would. I spent those 2 weeks getting ready. Carol established the irrevocable trust. Dr. Bramwell delivered her report. I printed bank statements, account summaries, the firm partnership agreement, the buyout contract, the insurance payout records. I photographed everything. I put copies in a safety deposit box at Savannah Bank and Trust. I organized everything into folders, not the way Crystal organized her folder, for presentation, for winning, but the way I organized documents for 20 years in a company that needed everything to be exactly right. 2 weeks to the day, I called James. I've thought about what you and Crystal proposed, I told him. I'd like to have a family meeting at my attorney's office. I want to make sure we all have complete information before any decisions get made. He exhaled. Relief, I think. He thought I'd decided to cooperate. Yeah, Mom, of course. When? Tuesday at 2. I'll tell Crystal. Please do. Carol's office is on Bay Street, 4 blocks from the river. It's a serious office in a serious building, the kind of space that reminds you immediately that what happens inside it has weight. When James and Crystal arrived, she was wearing another blazer, another leather portfolio under her arm. James wore a collared shirt and looked like a man walking into something he wasn't entirely sure about. Carol met them at the door. Professional. Warm enough. Not warm. She showed them into the conference room where I was already sitting. Mom. James hugged me. I let him. Crystal said, Helen, and set her portfolio on the table. Carol said, Thank you both for coming. Helen has some things she wants to share before we discuss anything about her future plans. She felt it was important that you have complete information. I hope that seems reasonable. Crystal said yes, of course. I looked at my son who I had packed lunches for, who I had sat with in emergency rooms and driven to college and watched cry at his father's graveside. My son, who I loved completely and who had, I believed, been slowly walked away from me by a woman with a leather portfolio and a very particular idea of what old age looked like. I want to ask you both something first, I said. What do you think Walter did for a living? James frowned. He was an engineer. Civil engineer. And what about me? What do you think I did? He shifted. You worked from home sometimes. When I was little, you helped Dad with paperwork. Crystal said, James mentioned you helped support the business. Administrative work. Administrative work. Okay, I said. Then I need to correct the record. Carol slid the first folder across the table. This is the partnership agreement for Carr and Whitmore Engineering Group, filed with the state of Georgia in March of 1998. The partners listed are Walter Allen Carr and Helen Louise Carr, 49-51% respectively. I paused. I had the larger share. We kept it that way for tax purposes. Walter didn't mind. James picked up the document and stared at it. For 26 years, I was the operations director and co-owner of an engineering firm that employed 82 people and held active contracts with the Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, and Florida Departments of Transportation. I handled the contracts. I handled the compliance. I handled the financials. I was not doing administrative work, Crystal. I was running half the company. James set the document down. Why didn't you ever say anything? You knew your father was an engineer. You knew we worked hard. What you didn't know was the scale of it, because we didn't think it was useful for you to know. We watched what happened to people who grew up knowing the number. We didn't want that for you. Crystal was reading the partnership agreement. Her face had gone careful, a lawyer's face or an accountant's face, recalculating. Carol opened the second folder, articles. The Savannah Morning News Engineering News Record, a regional business journal, profiles of Carr and Whitmore over the years. A photo of Walter and me at the firm's 20th anniversary dinner, both of us in formal clothes I barely remembered wearing. Successful firm, Carol said. When Walter passed, Helen negotiated a buyout of her stake from the remaining partners. Third folder, the buyout agreement, $3.8 million. 2 payments. First payment, I said, arrived September of last year. Second payment is due in April. I slid the bank statement across. The deposit line, $1.9 million. Crystal's hand moved slightly. I watched it. Additionally, Carol said, sliding the fourth folder, Helen's personal investment accounts, which she has managed independently for 20 years. Vanguard, $4.1 million. A separate money market account of $380,000. A municipal bond portfolio from a life insurance payout that Walter carried, $1.5 million, reinvested after probate. She looked up. Walter carried a significant policy. Helen received that payout in full. James had stopped looking at the documents. He was looking at me. The house on Gaston Street, Carol continued, was independently appraised at $890,000 last spring. Owned free and clear, no mortgage. Helen also holds an interest in 2 rental properties in the historic district, one on Jones Street, one on Liberty, both purchased during the firm years. Combined current value approximately $980,000, generating just over $4,500 per month in rental income. Crystal set down the document she'd been holding. Her face had gone from careful to pale. Total liquid assets, Carol said, approximately $8.1 million. Total real estate holdings, approximately $1.87 million. Combined net worth, inclusive of the April payment, approximately $11.3 million. The conference room was very quiet. Somewhere outside, a boat moved on the river. I could hear it through the window. James said slowly, "Mom, yes. $11 million? Approximately. The markets move." Crystal stood up. It was sudden enough that her chair rolled back against the credenza. You sat there and let us come to your house with a brochure." She turned to James. "Did you know any of this?" "No." His voice was flat. "I had no idea." She turned back to me, and I saw something I hadn't expected to see on her face. Not anger exactly. Something closer to humiliation. She was good at her job. She prided herself on knowing what things were worth. She had looked at me, at my sensible shoes and my 2009 Buick and my peach cobbler, and she had seen a problem to be solved. She had been completely, fundamentally wrong. "This doesn't change the fact that you're living alone," she started. "Crystal," Carol's voice was quiet and final, "I'd like to show you a few more things." The psychiatric evaluation came next. Dr. Bramwell's report. Carol read selected lines. 94th percentile cognitive function. Expert level financial literacy. Sound judgment. No indicators of diminished capacity. In my professional opinion, Helen Carr is fully capable of managing her own financial and personal affairs and would be better qualified than most individuals to make complex long-term decisions. Then the recordings. Carol set the transcripts on the table, printed, time-stamped, annotated. October 14th. Crystal, on the phone. "We have a plan. You're going to end up looking like you refused help until it was too late." October 4th, at the house. "The remainder could go into a managed account. James and I would help oversee it." September 29th. That one James didn't know about. A call I'd recorded where Crystal spoke to me alone, while James was walking in the neighborhood. In that call, she'd said, "Honestly, Helen, the kindest thing you can do for everyone, including yourself, is to stop being sentimental about the house. It's an asset. Treat it like one." James read that transcript twice. "You called her alone?" he said. Crystal said nothing. "You called my mother alone and told her to stop being sentimental." His voice had changed. I'd heard that voice once before, when James was 16 and found out a friend had lied to him badly. Quiet and certain. "You told her to treat her home like an asset. Well, my father had been dead for less than 2 years. James, I was trying to—" "Don't." He held up one hand, just one hand, quietly, and she stopped. Carol said, "Georgia law makes financial exploitation of elder adults a felony. The pattern documented here, the pressure tactics, the prearranged wait list, the push for power of attorney before any court involvement, the solo calls to isolate Helen from James's presence during discussions, meets several elements of that definition. We are not filing charges today. Helen doesn't want that." She looked at me and I nodded. "But we are establishing, clearly and on the record, what happened here and what will happen if anything like it happens again." She laid out the terms the same way you present a contract. No further contact from Crystal about Helen's finances, property, living arrangements, or legal affairs. No petitions of any kind, guardianship, conservatorship, power of attorney, without Helen's explicit initiation. The Whitfield crossing arrangements, whatever they were, to be canceled. a written acknowledgement of these terms, signed within 72 hours. In return, no criminal referral, no bar complaint, though Carol noted clearly that a complaint regarding a licensed CPA using her professional credential to pressure a family member would be reviewed seriously. No civil suit. James signed the acknowledgement that day without waiting for the 72 hours. Crystal took it home. She signed it the next morning and faxed it back. I drove home along the river. Savannah in October is something. The live oaks with their Spanish moss. The light going gold over the water. The city that has survived so many things and still looks like itself. I parked in my driveway and sat for a moment before going inside. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired and sad, and underneath that, something steadier, like ground you find under mud after a flood. James called me that evening. He was not at home. He was in a hotel near the airport. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I don't have the words for how sorry I am. I know. I didn't know what she was doing. I let myself believe it was about you, about caring for you. I didn't ask enough questions." "No," I said, "you didn't." A long quiet. "What happens now?" I thought about that. "Now, I think you need some time to figure out what you're doing with your life. And I need some time to let myself be angry before I can do anything else. Those can both be true at the same time." "Are you angry at me?" "Yes. And I love you." Both of those are also true at the same time. He filed for divorce 4 months later. I won't say it was only because of what happened in Carol's conference room. I think there were years of smaller things, but I know that day cracked something open that didn't close again. The proceedings were difficult. Crystal was meticulous and thorough, the way she was about everything. She fought for what she believed she was owed. In the end, the judge was not impressed by her, which I think surprised her more than losing did. James lives in a rented house in the Starland district now, close enough to visit, far enough for both of us to breathe. We have lunch on the first Sunday of every month at a restaurant on Whitaker Street. He started seeing someone, a teacher, a quiet woman named Anna, who brings flowers when she comes to dinner and asks about Walter's photographs on the wall with what appears to be genuine interest. I like her. I'm watching carefully, but I like her. The house on Gaston Street has new floors in the back bedroom and a repainted porch. Projects I did because I wanted to, because this house is mine, and I take care of what is mine. In March, I started spending weekends in Charleston. I'm looking at a small property there. Nothing dramatic, just somewhere else to be when Savannah feels like a museum of my own grief. Ruth comes sometimes. We walk and eat good seafood and act younger than we are, which is its own kind of joy. I also started working with Carol on something I've been thinking about since the week everything happened. A referral network for older adults in Chatham County who are facing financial pressure from family members. Not a formal legal clinic. I don't have the infrastructure for that yet. But a list of attorneys, a list of evaluating physicians, a phone number people can call. We've helped 3 women so far. One of them, a 78-year-old retired teacher from Thunderbolt, had her savings account systematically drained by her son-in-law over 14 months. He called it loan repayment. The DA called it something else. She called me after we helped her get her money back. She was crying, and I understood the specific quality of those tears. Not because the money was back, but because someone had taken her seriously, had looked at her and seen a person with rights instead of a problem with assets. I told her what I believe, which is this: being older does not make you less. Grieving does not make you incompetent. Living quietly does not mean you have nothing. I'm 67 now. The maple out front? No, wait, I don't have a maple. I have 2 live oaks in the front yard that Walter planted in 1994, which were small and uncertain then and are magnificent now. The way things are when you give them enough time. This morning, I sat on the porch with my coffee and looked at them and thought about what Walter would say about all of it. He would probably not say much. He'd make that sound he made, half laugh, half exhale, and he'd shake his head and he'd say, "They really didn't know who they were dealing with, did they?" "No," I'd say. "They really didn't. And that in the end was their mistake, not mine. My name is Helen Carr. I'm 67 years old and I live in the house I chose, on the street I love, in the city where I built my life. What I have is mine. What I know is mine. And how I live from here, that is mine too. Every last bit of it. I've thought a lot about what Crystal actually did wrong. Not the surface of it, the brochure, the wait list, the leather folder she carried into my living room like she was closing a deal. Those were symptoms. What she actually did wrong was decide she already knew the answer before she asked the question. She looked at me, my sensible shoes, my old Buick, my peach cobbler cooling on the counter, and she decided what I was. A widow. A burden. An asset poorly managed by its current holder. She never once considered that the picture she was seeing was one I had chosen to present to the world, not because I was hiding something shameful, but because Walter and I had learned a long time ago that people treat you differently when they know the number. And we didn't need to be treated differently, we just needed to do the work. That's the part I keep coming back to. Crystal was intelligent. She was organized, thorough, professionally accomplished. And she was completely undone by one assumption she never thought to question. She assumed that quiet meant small, that modest meant limited, that a woman who clipped coupons and drove a car with a dent in the bumper couldn't possibly have built something worth protecting. There's a cost to that kind of thinking, and eventually it always comes due. James paid part of that cost too, and I want to be honest about that because I love him, and the truth doesn't stop being true, because it's uncomfortable. He let himself believe what was easier to believe. He let someone he loved do his thinking for him about someone else he loved, and he didn't ask the questions a son should ask. Not because he was cruel. James is not a cruel person, but because it required less of him not to. That's not cruelty. It's a different kind of failure, and it carries its own weight. What I learned, what I already knew but had to live through again to remember, is that integrity isn't something you perform for an audience. Walter and I worked the way we worked, lived the way we lived, because we believed in the value of what we were building. Not the dollar value, the actual value, the thing itself. You can't fake that over 40 years. You can't fake it in the way your son turns out either, even when he loses his footing for a while. James found his way back. I believe that matters. And I learned something about myself too. In the weeks between that Saturday in my living room and the day in Carol's conference room, I learned that I had been so deep in grief that I'd almost forgotten I was still a person with standing, with rights, with decades of competence behind me that didn't evaporate because Walter was gone. Grief can do that. It can make you feel like you've been reduced to the loss itself, like you're just the shell of the life that used to be. I had to fight my way back to myself, and I had to do it quietly, methodically, the same way I'd always done everything that mattered. That's what I want anyone who's listening to carry with them. Not the money, not the legal strategy, not even the specific details of what happened in that conference room. Just this: you do not become less when the people around you decide you are. You get to decide what you are. And if someone mistakes your stillness for weakness, your modesty for limitation, your grief for incompetence, that is their error, not yours. Let them find out.